Okay, there we go. So hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am very grateful to have the opportunity to share this information that I have with you today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kayla Simberski. I am a certified advanced grief recovery specialist, and that means that I am allowed to facilitate the grief recovery method, which is a program created by or facilitated by the Grief Recovery Institute, which was founded over 35 years ago. I'll be getting into a little bit more about that later. But before I get into the presentations and the tools, I want to share a little bit about why I actually teach this method to deal with grief. So when I was 8 years old, I suffered my first major tragedy, my first major loss, which was my mother. And it was very devastating, and she died very suddenly and in a very heartbreaking way. I was told that she had frozen to death, and this was in the middle of winter, alone. And needless to say, I was, like I said, devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I lost somebody very important to me. And nobody ever really gave me a full story as to what happened. I don't think anybody really knew exactly what happened to my mother. And I think everybody was just trying to come up with some sort of story to explain the situation, which I did as well, to try and kind of cope with the situation, came up with explanations that would make sense, but nobody ever really knew the story. So I have suffered other tragedies and other losses throughout my life, but that was the big one that has really stuck with me for years. Ever since I was 8 years old, it had stuck with me. And I lived with a great deal of emotional pain. My ability to have stable relationships was very difficult, as I myself was emotionally unstable. And, my self-worth was low. So I was always afraid to pursue anything very important to me. So career choices, healthy relationships, and those sort of things. I made a lot of poor choices in my life between the relationships I've had with people I shouldn't have, getting into things like drugs and alcohol, making a lot of unhealthy choices with my life, using entertainment and many other things to try and distract myself from the pain of the heartbreak that I suffered as an 8-year-old girl. And so this is the reason I do what I do today. And I try to help other people with their grief, is because I have learned that I no longer need to just kind of live with that pain anymore. I know that most of us out there believe that when we suffer a great loss and we suffer a great deal of pain, that we think we just have to learn how to live with it and there's no way to heal, but that is not the truth. The truth is there is a way to heal. It's just most of us don't know how to do it, and we just come up with other ways to cope with it and live with it. And I'm here to show you how you can start healing that burden and release the burden of grief. And after I did it, I have to say it absolutely changed my life. So I'm hoping that we can change yours today. So I'm going to share a little bit today. I'm going to use the PowerPoint slides. And again, those of you watching through this video that I'm looking at here, you're not going to be able to see the presentation. If you want to be able to see them after, leave a comment and I will make sure you get those. So through the other live here, if anybody's watching that one, you will be able to see it. So I'm going to share my screen. And I will get to, there we go. So this picture here that is showing is a copy of the Grief Recovery Handbook. So this is where the magic happens. The Grief Recovery Handbook was written by John W. James and Russell Friedman. John W. James was the founder of the Grief Recovery Institute. So like I said, the Grief Recovery Institute was founded over 35 years ago. It's been around for a while. And if you want to learn more about the method and about the Institute, this book is a great place to start after watching this presentation. If you don't want to personally talk to me, you can look into this book. And this is what changed my life, going into this book first. So I want to make a point of saying that the method, the grief recovery method, is started with the heart of a grieving dad. So it started with the founder, John W. James. And I want to tell you a little bit about this. John W. James, his wife and his daughter at the time, in the year of 1977, they were expecting the birth of a little baby boy. Now, unfortunately, 3 days after the birth, the baby died. He didn't make it. And of course, the family was absolutely devastated. Nothing helped John or his family recover from this devastating loss. Absolutely devastating loss. And not only that, but when people tried to help them, usually it resulted in very unhelpful or even sometimes hurtful comments. So things like, you're lucky you have another child, which was their daughter at the time. You're lucky you can always try again. You're young, you could try for another child. Or even things like, God just needed another angel. And these sort of comments did not help at all. So eventually, John decided to take matters into his own hands and to figure out how he can finally release this burden that he was living with. And through loads of research, he found that there was no help. There was nothing to deal with this pain. So that led him into eventually creating the grief recovery method. He started by healing himself. And through healing himself, other people reached out to him to teach them what he did to heal himself from that overbearing pain that he must have been going through. And he started helping other people. And through that, he developed the method, which turned into the Grief Recovery Handbook and eventually turned into the Institute and where it is today. And the reason I just want you to understand this backstory is just so you understand that what I'm talking about comes from somebody who healed themselves and who's actually gone through the steps and has used these steps to heal their own pain. It's not just somebody who's done a lot of research and thinks that they know what they're doing. This is somebody who's actually taken these steps to develop it for themselves and has used it to help countless of other people and has turned the Institute into what it is today. So today, now the Grief Recovery Institute and the method is nationally and internationally renowned in the area of grief. It is the first evidence-based program in the world to actually help people recover and heal from their grief. And amongst the grief recovery method, a few other programs have been created by the Institute based off the grief recovery method. So they're called Helping Children with Loss. So there's a program specifically for helping children. There's pet loss and a few others. And we do groups, we do one-on-ones. We also do online and in person. I specifically work on in person mostly. And then here's just for those of you who could see the presentation, here's a little stamp that shows that the grief recovery method is established as an evidence-based program. So it is actually a fact to work. So I want to get into the topic of loss here. So for those of you watching, I want you to think for a second, what does the word loss mean to you, right? So whenever the word loss or grief comes to mind, what do you think of? What's the first thing that kind of pops into your head? So what I want to say here is there are over 40 types of losses that can occur in your life. It's not going to just be one or two things. The most common examples that come up are usually death and divorce. Those are usually the first things that most people think of. But like I said, there's more than 40 different things. And some of those examples can be a change. So a major change in your life, such as moving, a career change, or even a career loss, financial change, going through like empty nest syndrome, or maybe a serious health decline happens. Anything in your life where there's a serious change can cause grief, can be a loss. Breakup of a relationship, it could be romantic or otherwise. It doesn't have to be like an actual divorce. Maybe you and a best friend have an argument and don't talk for years and you grieve that loss, or any other relationship at all. Abuse can cause a loss of trust or a loss of safety. And this is especially true when it happens to children. And then the same for neglect. Neglect can cause a loss of love, a loss of connection. And again, this is especially true for children when it happens in our younger years. So again, I want you to take a moment to think, outside of death and divorce, what other losses have occurred in your life that maybe you might be grieving along with whatever else that really has struck with you. Now, I want to get into grief a little bit more. So it's very important to have a working definition of what grief is, so that way we can really comprehend what it is rather than just understand it as an emotion, because it is very emotional. The grief, the definition that we have with the Institute is that grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. And I want to put an emphasis on any kind, because just like I put in the last slide, for those of you who can see the slide, you can see that there are countless of things that we can lose. It doesn't just have to be, like I said, death and divorce. So any kind of loss, and there are countless of things that we lose in our lives that we can end up grieving. And any type of grief is absolutely 100% normal and natural. The problem that we have in society is that the way we deal with grief is not helpful. And this is where grief recovery comes in and can become helpful and help you deal with your grief. So I want to talk about some signs of grieving. So because we live in a largely intellectualized society, we like to think our way through things. We don't really embrace the grieving process. And many times we don't even realize that we're grieving. And that's kind of a big problem, is we think that it's something else that's going on. So for example, some of the signs of grieving can actually be depression. Sometimes when we're going through a depression, what's actually happening is we're grieving. Another one is a lack of energy. We can be going through a serious lack of energy. We just feel drained when we're grieving. Being out of the moment. So struggling with being focused or struggling to concentrate can be a sign of grieving. Anger and overreactions. If you're struggling to kind of keep control of your emotional stability and you find yourself overreacting or getting angry very easily, these can also be signs of grieving. And when we isolate ourselves, often it's due to grief. And then also repeated behaviors of things that we don't want to keep doing. So even things like nail biting, like chewing on your hair, snacking on lots of sugary things, like any repeated behavior that you might be doing or experiencing that you're trying to stop and you're struggling to stop. So these can all be signs of grief. And if you've been kind of experiencing any of these sort of things without any explanation as to why you're experiencing them, the problem could actually be unresolved grief. And I know for me, that was my problem. My problem was I was experiencing a lot of these sort of things that I just mentioned. And I realized that my problem was I was grieving the loss of my mother ever since I was 8 years old. So for over 20 years, I was grieving and I had no idea until I became aware of it through reading the Grief Recovery Handbook. So I want to get into here a myth that we're often told is that time heals, right? That time heals all wounds. Now, I'm sure everybody has heard this at one point. If you've heard it, leave a comment and just say, yeah, I've heard that myth or whatever. And but it's kind of everywhere. It's a very common thing that we all say all the time, is that time heals all wounds. Now, here's the thing, is that time alone, it doesn't heal wounds. It's the actions we take during the time that actually heals the wound. So, and then the problem is we combined this time heals wounds myth, and we combine it with other myths. So we have give it time heals wounds. Then we also try to be strong for others during this time. We try to keep busy during this time. And sometimes we'll even try to replace the loss. So if we lose a pet and it's very devastating, we might go and replace the pet with another pet. And it doesn't work that way, but I'll get into that a little bit more. But either way, all of these myths combined, they end up leading to burnout. And they end up leading to a lot of stress. They end up leading to midlife crises and those sort of things whenever we just give it time, try to be strong for others and try to keep busy and all of these things. But I want to get into a little bit more about the why giving it time alone does not heal the wound. Okay, so on the slide, I'm showing a little picture of a little girl here, or an outline of a little girl, and we're going to call her Sally. So now Sally, she's 6 years old. Now little Sally here, she has been bullied at school. So there's one thing that she's grieving. Her parents are going through a divorce. So there's another thing she's grieving. Her dog died. So there's another thing she's grieving. Her mother is emotionally absent. And maybe her brother died last year in a car accident. So we have this little girl suffering all these losses and all these things that she's grieving, and she has no idea how to handle them. She's just bottling them up. And time goes on and Sally grows up, and now she's an adult. We'll say she's 30 years old. So where did all those losses go that she's occurred as a child? Well, they stay with her, right? So now she still has all of these little heartbreaks that she's carrying along with her, but it stands to reason that as she grows older, she's going to occur more losses in her life. So on top of these losses that she's had since she was a little girl, now maybe she's going through her own divorce. Maybe she's struggling with her career choices and she's struggling to keep a job. Maybe she's lost her home. Maybe she's suffered a miscarriage, and or maybe she's been told she has cancer and she can't have children. And so she's suffering all of the losses that she had as a child, plus all of these new losses that she's occurred throughout her life. And they don't go anywhere. They stay with her. They don't leave. So this is what we mean by time doesn't heal wounds. Everything comes and stays with us. And it's very dangerous, in fact, whenever we try to live our lives thinking that time heals wounds, because through the slides, if you're watching the slides, you'll see that she has all these little heartbreaks. They stay with her. And then now she just gets more angry. She overreacts more easily. She's more tired. She's having all these other struggles like depression and stuff, like I mentioned, until she blows up and she has her mental breakdown, right? And this is what happens when we don't take the proper action steps to heal our grief and we just kind of wait for the pain to go away, is eventually it forces us to either heal or break down, is how it usually goes. So if you're not watching the slides, again, please leave the comment if you want to see the slides, and I will make sure you get to see them afterwards. But I'm going to continue here now. So I want to get into what it looks like when we don't deal with our grief, when we have unresolved grief. So we carry around unresolved grief, right? And this kind of means we have all this pent up energy that we don't know what to deal with. And without the proper tools, we figure out a way to grieve in other ways and other ways to cope with it. So what we talk about in the grief recovery method are what we call Stirbs. So Stirbs are known as short-term energy relieving behaviors. And what these do is they give us something to do to distract us from the pain while we wait for the time to heal the wounds, right? So here's an example is imagine little Sally. She's being bullied at school, right? And one of the things that she does is she goes home crying, and she tells her mommy that she was being bullied at school. And her mom says, well, here, have a cookie, you'll feel better. So now what happens in these sort of situations is Sally learns that food is a coping mechanism for her pain. So now food has become a Stirb, a short-term energy relieving behavior for Sally. So this could have resulted in turning into all sorts of eating disorders and stuff, right, in the long term. But what else can be a Stirb? Like there's really anything can be a Stirb, but some examples, food can become one. Drugs is a common one. Daydreaming, fantasizing, trying to escape reality with your brain. Media, any type of media. So like, social media, the news, Netflix, music, any type of media counts. Anger can actually be a Stirb. Sometimes we use anger as a way to control our environment and control ourselves. Sleep, some people will start sleeping more, sleeping less. It can go in either direction. Alcohol can get used as a Stirb. So these are the ones I have on the slides showing. And then, it could be anything else outside of that. It could be relationships. People will jump from one relationship to another whenever we are, we're struggling with our relationships. Hello, Hillary. Thank you for being here. There's a Zoom. Yes, I will share the Zoom recording afterwards so you can see the slides. I'll explain later. So relationships, we go through periods of trying to control things around us. Sex and pornography can become Stirbs. Trying to serve other people can sometimes be a Stirb. Working, shopping, gambling, exercising, you name it, it could be really anything. Now, looking at this list or what I've just listed off, it seems like some of the stuff is bad and some of the stuff isn't so bad. So for instance, food is good. We need to eat. Sleep is important. Exercising is important. Those sort of things are all good things. But it's whenever we start to do them to ignore our pain and to avoid something, that's when it becomes a problem. So that's whenever it becomes a thing more like workaholism or shopaholism, or it turns into overeating, or it turns into over-exercising. And even when we're trying to serve other people as a method of dealing with our pain, that becomes a problem, because I've learned through myself and through other people that I know who do this, is when we serve other people to ignore our pain, what happens is we serve them in a way that doesn't serve them that they need. We try to serve them in a way that helps us, right? Because we're dealing with our own grief and we don't realize we're doing this. So we try to serve them in a way to help ourselves to cope with our grief, rather than serving them in a way that they need to be served. And that causes more problems down the road. So this Stirbs are the things that we do to ignore our pain, to simplify this and get it straightforward. So now I'll get into some of the tools that you can start doing to try and actually deal with your grief and your pain. So the first one is, of course, acceptance and awareness. Before watching this video, some of you might not have even been aware that you were grieving, or might be becoming more aware of some of the other things that you're grieving. You might have forgotten or not even realized that you were grieving. So that's key, is becoming aware and accepting that, first of all. And then also starting to become aware of your Stirbs and accepting that you're doing these things to try and ignore what you're grieving, ignore the pain that you're going through, right? And that brings me to the next thing, is learning to have a new relationship with your Stirbs. So something you can do whenever you find yourself trying to do something as a means of distraction, take a moment to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is it that I'm trying to ignore? And just take a second to sit in it. And I highly encourage you to even start journaling and writing it down, and write down what it is that you're doing to ignore the pain. And then take a second to think about, what is it that's actually bothering you? What is it that you're trying to kind of run away from or trying to ignore, and write that down. And take some time to pay attention to how often this happens to you. Pay attention to all the things that you use to ignore the pain, and all the things that are bothering you. And this will start to kind of help you become more aware and accept more of where your struggles are coming from, outside of maybe just the one that you know is there. There might be more. And then after that, the next important step is finding people to talk to that are safe. And what I mean by safe is, somebody who's willing to listen and to make you feel heard, without feeling like they want to try and give you helpful advice and try to fix you. And what we see is in society is that often when people talk about their problems, or people talk about their struggles or their grief, is that somebody else, they're listening to respond, and they're listening to try and help you. But those comments are not helpful. Like I mentioned at the beginning with John W. James and losing his baby, people would try to give him helpful comments, but they weren't helpful. They were very, very hurtful and very unhelpful. And this is what often happens. So you need to find people who don't do that. And then you can talk to those people who make you feel heard, make you feel safe. And then in addition, doing that for other people, being a safe, open heart person with ears who can listen to without feeling the need to respond, and just being there to listen. And that is really the important thing, because we need to go from here, we need to go from our brains to our hearts when we're grieving. So writing things down is very much the intellectualizing part of things, but then we need to bring it to our hearts, because this is the part that needs to heal. And in order to do that, we need to verbalize and talk to somebody else who will listen to us and hear us. And that's really the only way to move forward and to heal in the long term. So now this has really just been an introduction to grief and loss, and some practical ways in dealing with our losses in a healthy way, rather than just waiting for it to stop, right? Now, if you'd like to go deeper with me, I do offer the online grief support for the grief recovery method, one-on-one online. I also am able to offer the Helping Children with Loss program. So if either of those might be an interest to you, then please leave a comment. Please reach out to me personally, and we can talk about it. On the slides here, I'll leave my personal contact information. There's my email. You can contact me through Facebook. I also have an Instagram known as Long-Term Solutions. I also have a free Facebook group known as Long-Term Solutions. I can leave a link to that below the video for anybody who would like to join. Initial consultations are free. So if you want to just book some time to talk, learn as much as you can learn about through the initial consultation, see if it's the right decision for you, and then we can go from there. There's nothing to lose. And if that's as far as you want to go, that's absolutely fine. So that way you'll at least know if this is the right direction for you. But otherwise, I hope that this video has been helpful for you guys. I'm going to stop sharing my screen on this one so that way you can see me fully. So yes, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, leave comments below the video, reach out to me personally, and I will be happy to answer as best I can through messages. Please like the video. If you're on the YouTube watching this, please subscribe to my channel. I'll have more videos to come dealing with grief recovery and the other parts of my business. I do yoga, fitness and weight loss and nutrition and all those things as well. So if those are topics that you're interested as well, we can dive into those through my Facebook group or through my YouTube page. So please leave any comments if you're interested in any of that. And again, I am eternally grateful for those of you who spent your time willing to be here, listen to what I have to say, and I hope what I had to share today was beneficial. I really hope that this helps some of you out there. So thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to stop recording now. But if anybody